I won several $1,000s playing playoff best ball in just my second year doing it. Now, obviously, I didn't win it all, but placing 82nd out of 90,000 entrants for $3,500 is definitely a spot a lot of people would want to be in. And what you need to understand is that there's several factors that need to be at play for you to do well and to increase your odds of winning in playoff best ball. And we're going to go through those today. So first of all, the first thing I want to get into is how does best ball work, right? How does playoff best ball work? So the first thing I want to explain to you is what exactly best ball is. So it's just like normal fantasy football, right? You have a draft and you're basically trying to win the league in fantasy football. But the difference between best ball drafts and your normal typical way of playing fantasy football or redraft style is that best ball, you can draft a player in the 14th round, for example, and they can outscore your first round player without you having to move anyone in your lineup. It automatically takes the best score every single week at each position and logs it for that particular week, so you get the best possible score possible based on your roster construction. So what playoff best ball does is it takes that same style of scoring and it adds an entirely different twist on it. So for example, I think the simplest way for me to break this down to you is that if I have Lamar Jackson in playoff best ball, and let's say that the Ravens end up getting bounced out of the first round of the playoffs in the wild card round, then Lamar Jackson will not score for me on that best ball team in the playoffs any longer because his team was eliminated in the playoffs. On the other end of the spectrum, let's say that the Los Angeles Rams make it to the Super Bowl, but they do not play in the wild card because they have a first round bye. So if I have Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua, I can have those two guys score for me in the divisional round, the conference championship, and the Super Bowl, but they will not score for me on the bye weeks. So moving past that, the number one thing that I think needs to be at play is that you need to make sure you're targeting the best possible teams with the greatest possibility of making it to the Super Bowl in order for you to do well in playoff best ball. Because the bottom line is this: you must increase the chances that you have players who score into the Super Bowl. And therefore, to increase those chances, you need to target players on the best teams who have the best chance to make it to the Super Bowl. And I'll even take it a step further. Not just the best players on the best teams, but target role players. For example, if you had guys in the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles game last year, Saquon Barkley would have been an obvious great guy to have. Xavier Worthy actually was a really good player to have as well. While he was a role player last year for them, he still was a great play because he was in the game. Even having somebody like a backup running back or a second string tight end, for example, may do you very well because those types of teams are going to be playing and having more opportunities for them to score. So the teams that I've always targeted playing best ball are teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Buffalo Bills, and the Baltimore Ravens because they historically have been at the second round or at the conference finals or at the Super Bowl at a very minimum. They've historically been our best playoff best ball bets when it comes to targeting those players. Now, last year, my winning team had Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley, Xavier Worthy, and Travis Kelce all in the Super Bowl together. So I was able to put up 75.08 total points in that game to place 82nd in the Super Bowl round. Now, the only reason I did that well entirely is because I had 4 out of a possible 5 players scoring points for me during the Super Bowl. That's what best ball is. You have 5 players who could score for you in those best ball tournaments in the playoffs, and I had 4 guys out of 5 scoring for me, which is a lot more than a majority of the people who actually make it to the tournament have. Just a pro tip. Now, some of you may be thinking to me, well, hold on, Brian, slow down for a second. How did you actually advance to the Super Bowl finals in the first place? Like, how did you make it past the first round? Because some of you may remember the Kansas City Chiefs had a bye week, meaning that Patrick Mahomes, Xavier Worthy, and Travis Kelce did not score for me during the wild card round. So how did I advance past the wild card round alone since those 3 guys were not scoring? So if you look at that team, which is on the screen, Jaden Daniels, Saquon Barkley, Lad McConkey, Terry McLaurin, and Romeo Doubs, all of those guys played in round 1. of the wild card. And you could see on the screen, Jaden Daniels, Ladd McConkey, and Terry McLaurin, they had really good games in that first round right there. Now, Ladd, Dobbs, and Dobbins, J.K. Dobbins, lost in round one. The Chargers and the Packers both lost in the wild card game in 2024/2025, but they served their purpose for me while those other players were not in and not able to play during that wild card round. So then by the time I advanced out of the wild card, the divisional round is where I had my 3 Chiefs players back, and they were able to fill the gap of those other teams that I had lost. The bottom line is you want to target teams heavily that have the best chances of making the Super Bowl and have pop players on teams who won't advance, but they will fill in for those key spots, particularly in the wild card round. So who are the teams to target in 2025? I will be honest with you, this is a tough year. Like, this is a massive shift that we are seeing right now. It's an entire power realignment in the NFL because teams like the Eagles, they're circling the drain. Teams like the Chiefs, they may not even make the playoffs. Well, guess what? Those were our 2 Super Bowl teams who not only were just last year's Super Bowl teams, but they had already met each other in 2022 Super Bowl. The Chiefs have basically been to every Super Bowl for the last 5 years. So you can kind of feel the uncertainty around the league of who actually is going to make it to the big dance. However, here's what we do know about playoffs football and what wins in the playoffs. There's 3 things that win in the playoffs very consistently in the NFL. Number 1 is defense. If you have a top-tier defense, you are going to advance no matter how bad your quarterback is, no matter how bad your running game is. Good defenses translate to the NFL playoffs. Number 2 is the running game. If you've got a good running game like Philadelphia had last year with Saquon Barkley, you are going to advance at least a couple of games into the playoffs. And number 3, if you have elite quarterback play, this will propel you. Patrick Mahomes for several years was like this. Josh Allen has always been a threat in the playoffs because he is an elite guy. Types of guys like that are going to advance in the playoffs as well. So here's my current favorite teams to target for best ball playoff success in 2025. And if you know anything about my other main channel, Fantasy Football Roundup, where I go through rankings on a weekly basis, I'm going to put these into rankings and tiers because that's just what I do. So the first tier right here, I've actually got the Los Angeles Rams at number 1. Now, the reason I like the Rams in the playoffs, probably the best as of right now to make it to the Super Bowl, is because they've got a combination of those 3 keys that I was talking about. The Los Angeles Rams have a pretty solid defense. They are able to stop the run very well. Their secondary play has improved with some moves that they had made at the trade deadline. And they obviously have a very good quarterback with very good weapons as well. That stuff translates in the playoffs. Now, the Green Bay Packers, I also like as my number 2 team inside the same tier. I like the Packers a lot because of the fact that the Packers have a good run defense. They've got a good defense as a whole. They've got a good running game, and their quarterback, in my opinion, is very good. Now, whether or not you trust Jordan Love in the playoffs, that still remains to be seen. But I do think the other pieces around him could come together for the perfect storm this year for them. The Buffalo Bills are at number 3 to round out this tier, and that is simply because they have Josh Allen. I do not like their defense. Their running game is hit or miss, while I do like the running game. And that has led to some playoff victories in the past. Josh Allen is the main piece here because you can never count him out. Now, dropping down to that next tier, I like the Broncos at 4 because of the fact that their defense is great, but I could poke holes in the running game and in the quarterback play, obviously, so they are not belonging inside of tier 1 in my eyes as of right now. The New England Patriots at number 5. I do think that their quarterback play is very interesting. I think Drake May, the only concern I have with him is that he has no experience in the playoffs. So this is a whole new ball game for him, and he does not know what to do with himself. But that being said, Mike Vrabel being a dominant head coach and their defense being pretty good, I do think gives them a little bit of an edge over other teams. The Houston Texans are at number 6 to round out this tier, and they are a risky one because if you start drafting today on Underdog, for example, and I don't think Playoff Best Ball is actually active on Underdog, but when you start drafting on Playoff Best Ball on Underdog, Houston Texans are not guaranteed a playoff spot as of the time of this filming. But what I will say is if they do make it, the Houston Texans have a dominant defense and they will try to run the ball at the very least and sometimes will have success. And CJ Stroud, while not the best quarterback in the NFL, is a winner. He has won multiple playoff games, and I believe that he could do it again this year. Now, dropping down to that last tier, the Los Angeles Chargers are at number 7, purely because of defense and quarterback play. Their run game, I do not trust. Their offensive line, I do not trust. But I still do believe I'd take them over the Seattle Seahawks, who are at 8. Because the Seahawks, in my opinion, will get burned by Sam Darnold one of these days. I do think Sam Darnold, we've seen a clear line of distinction. When he gets put in big game situations, such as playoff games, that's typically when we see the worst version of Sam Darnold. That being said, their defense is elite, and I don't love their running game either. That equates to a number 8 ranking. The Philadelphia Eagles at number 9. Their defense is dominant, and I will say this. They are circling the drain right now, and that's a problem. But they are a team that knows how to win in January and February. So that also does matter, along with a great running defense and a great defense in general. And the Chicago Bears at number 10. They're actually inside my top 10 because I do think that the Bears have a really good coach. They've got a really good run game, and I don't love their defense, and I don't know how Caleb will do in the playoffs, but I do love their run game, and I do love their coach. So I think they deserve the spot at number 10 over other teams like the Jags, who I think are probably in over their head in the playoffs, and other teams like the Buccaneers, who I do not have as a great play in the playoffs. Now, here's the number 2 key. You need to target pop, what I call pop, in the wild card round in specific. So you might be wondering, what does pop mean, right? If you target several teams who were on the Rams this year, like you get Devontae Adams, you get Matt Stafford, maybe you get Blake Corum, well, maybe the Los Angeles Rams get a round 1 bye. So you need to make up for that in the wild card round by getting a pop guy. So for example, last year on that winning team, I had Ladd McConkey, Jaden Daniels, and Terry McLaurin, particularly for that wild card round. That is one of the main reasons I drafted those 3 guys. And I targeted those 3 guys for 2 particular reasons. Number 1 is because I wanted the pop, and I liked Ladd because he was the only functioning piece in that offense in Los Angeles at the time. He ended up going off for a massive game in the wild card round while they got eliminated. And I also loved Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin because stacks are great in best ball, and also those 2 guys were clicking at the right time. And the other reason I got those 2 guys, and the other reason I drafted those 3 guys, is because I believe that both Los Angeles and the Washington Commanders had a decent shot to advance in the playoffs. And of course, Washington did on borrowed time. They did really well for that team because they ended up advancing to the conference championship. But the bottom line is, when 2 teams advance out of a 6-team pool in the first round, you can afford to have multiple players sit in the first week because they are on teams with bye weeks. All you need to do in that case is just fill in with pop players to get you past the first round. And the number 3 tip right here, this is very simple. Draft as many teams as possible. And I know some of you may not like to hear this because it costs money to get in these best ball tournaments. It's a $25 buy-in to the Gauntlet, which is the big Underdog tournament. But here's the reality, guys. Playoff best ball is very hard. It's very, very hard. And the bottom line also is that the more entrants you have, and the Gauntlet tournament on Underdog is a 90,000 person tournament, it very much significantly lowers your upside and your chances of winning in playoff best ball. The only way to increase your odds and those chances of winning is by drafting as many teams as possible. I personally spent $1,305 on best ball drafts last year in playoffs. That was 53 total teams, and I won $3,500. Was it worth it? You better believe it was.